I had this all worked out that Father Pavone was going to go first, and I was just going to say ditto. Now I got to be original. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here and tell you that I wrote a book a few years ago called Closed, 99 Ways to Stop Abortion. And it's a helter-skelter kind of book, you know, and people were calling me and say, how do you do this, how do you do that? And I got tired of writing letters, so I just thought I'll put it in a book. And I just put it down as it came, all kinds of things, pick at the abortionist home, tell the garbage man he's picking up corpses and things like that to make life interesting. But the first chapter is very, very significant. It has to be the first chapter because it's the most important thing we do in the pro-life movement, and that is sidewalk counseling. Because that's where you stop for a moment and help the woman think it through. And almost always, if she really thinks it through, she does not have the abortion. And we've had tremendous progress in this particular activity of the pro-life movement. Because the pro-life movement essentially is a movement of conversion. You know, we can have all kinds of laws that say you can't do this and can't do that and so on. But unless you convert the person who's going to kill the baby, you get nowhere. That's why sidewalk counseling is so important, because it's a one-on-one relationship to develop. And the people that do it well are the people who are saving the baby's lives. One-on-one. That's how we're going to have to do that. We could have a law passed tomorrow that abortion is no longer the law of the land and so on, and you would have abortions. You'd have back alley abortions, front alley abortions, whatever. You'd have them in the abortionist office. They would go on, because if a person's determined to destroy this child's life, they will go through with it unless you can show them the value of that life, the importance of that life, the beauty of that life, and God's plan for that life. God does not make junk. And I don't care what your reason is for an abortion, it's not reason enough to kill that child. And so that's why I think it's so important that we're having this meeting here, because we have to send sidewalk counselors out across the country. We have many abortion clinics that have nobody there talking to the women. Now, prayer is powerful, but as St. Benedict said, ora et labora, pray and work. And while we're here, this little blink of moment of time that we have on this earth, we have to pray and work. We prayed. We prayed sincerely tonight. We sang our prayer. But then we have to go out there and work like the devil. And as you know, the devil never sleeps. He works all the time. And so we have to work like that. We have to be dedicated. I have to go to the abortion clinic at least once a week. I have to, whether I want to or not, whether it's rain, snowing, whatever. Chicago has rotten weather compared to every place else I've ever been. I mean, it gets as hot as hell and as cold as the bottom of the ice plant, and it's awful weather, but no matter what, even if we just have to sit in our car, I have to go to the abortion clinic, because that's where it happens. That's where it happens. Right there, you see a pregnant woman walking in there with a beautiful human being in her body, and she's going to have it cut to shreds, taken away from her dead. And so you have to be there. You can't just talk about it. You can't just say, oh, abortion's bad, and I wish it'd go away, and so on. You have to go where it happens to keep it from happening. That's why this is so important. And we're called to do this. As I said, ora et labora, and you ought to learn that. It sounds good in Latin, you know. Work, pray, and work, in that order. Ora et labora. I was a Benedictine for a while, and I had to obey that all the time. And they really worked you, too, and they worked you. And you really prayed when you prayed. We get up at 3:30 in the morning and go say matins and lauds, and then we came back for 8 hours of prayer. We had different prayers in those days. The priests get off real easy nowadays. They skip prime, terce, sex, known, vestment. I think they still have vestment, compline. So one day I was up in the a little lobby that we had where they had a bulletin board. You could put anything up there. The brothers would take them down and snap beans during your free time, and people would put their favorite prayer. And one day I was reading the bulletin board, and there was a beautiful little thing written out there, and it said, "The time is out of joint. Oh, cursed plight that ever I was born to set it right." I thought, boy, that's a brilliant seminarian. Well, later on I read Hamlet, That was Hamlet saying the time was out of joint in Denmark. Something was rotten in Denmark, and he had to solve it. His father had been murdered by his uncle, and then his uncle had married his mother, and then his girlfriend was going mad, and he kills her father, and things were kind of a mess in Hamlet's light. And so he said that the time is out of joint, O cursed plight, that I was born to set it right. And that could be our motto. Look at this time we're living in now. Is it out of joint or what? It's falling apart. Society is falling apart. Things we wouldn't have dreamed of. Men wanting to be married to men. Women wanting a marriage ceremony with another woman. I mean, just unthinkable a few years ago. Pornography everywhere. Kids sleeping together, living together, taken for granted. It's just almost unbelievable, in my mind, the way things used to be. I'm old enough now to remember the good old days when they were good. Nowadays, people remember the good old days when somebody talks about it or reads about it, but I remember what it was like, and it was a lot better. Now it's almost unbelievable. And so the time is out of joint, and we are called to set it right. We are called. It's not accidental that you're here. God put you here. He wants an army. He wants an army of people who are willing to suffer for our society, willing to put themselves out. We have to get up early tomorrow to go to an abortion mill, to do something that makes us look like fools to a lot of people, but we don't care. St. Paul said that he would be a fool for Christ, that to people that didn't believe what he believed, he would look foolish. We look foolish. We go out on the street with these ugly signs that people hate. We take the worst signs we can find, the most horrible abortion you can think of. We make them real big. We have one that's 8 foot tall, and we stand on the bridges in Chicago. The other day, over 25,000 people saw us standing there for an hour and a half, going both ways, a lot of cars. We counted them. Well, it only been 20,000, but we exaggerate a little bit. Well, there might have been 2 or 3 people in some of these cars. Anyway, a lot of people saw it. We went down along the lakefront. We went to the Daily Center Plaza. We went to the suburbs, little towns, and we held these pictures. And people would come by and say, "That's disgusting." We'd say, "It certainly is. We shouldn't be able to take pictures like this and blow them up and have to show them to you. But abortion is murder. This is a victim. You have to see the victim in order to move society to change its morals." We had the same thing with slavery. You had to see these people whipped half to death. We have the picture of the man with all the scars and bruises and so on his back. You had to see the chains. William Wilberforce had to have pictures drawn of the slaves packed into the slave ships where you could hardly move. Chained down, packed in for a crossing that took 2 or 3 months. You had to see what happened to the little children working in the coal mines, the little girls working at the loom. We had to have photographs, and then we got child labor laws. The civil rights. We had to see the hoses turned on the protesters and the dogs on the chains being let out after. You had to see those things, and then you saw the victim, and then you did something about it. And if we don't show the victim, then we are remiss. We are not sincere in our belief that this is a valuable life, and it is tortured to death. We've got a law coming up in Indiana on fetal pain. The baby feels pain. That's a good law if it passes. And we have over 116 laws right now since January that have been introduced in the various states. But they have a law in Ohio that's coming up that I think is even better. If you can detect the heartbeat, the abortion cannot be performed. Detect the heartbeat. Well, that's good because we're getting better and better all the time with our various doptone amplifiers and so on. We can get the heartbeat almost before the young woman knows that she's pregnant. That would stop a lot of abortion. So we have to keep trying. We keep trying these different things, and some of them pass. I think we're winning because when we go out with these horrible signs that people hate and so on, we're getting more positive reaction than negative. used to always be negative. Get a life, this, that, and the other, the finger, all kind of things. Filthy language. Some woman stopped the other day and was screaming at me using foul language. I said, does your mother know you talk like this when she's not around? She said, leave my mother out of this. Anyway, I love the Face the Truth tours. We have what we call a swine count. You know, shouldn't do it, but it's one of those little inside things. And the now cows come out with their... politically correct has never bothered me much. I mean, call me a kraut if you want to. It doesn't upset me. But anyway, I'm sort of sick of political correctness. I like to talk English. I don't like seat belts either, or helmets when you're riding a bus. I don't like any restrictions at all, except the ones my wife puts on me. Anyway, we're going to suffer. We're going to suffer. You're going to pay for being pro-life. You probably already have. Everybody in this room has been considered a kook of something like that to your neighbors. One day the abortionists came down the street with a great big banner, Joe Scheidler kills women. 40 or some of them, they sat out in front and yelled and screamed and so on, and my daughter turned on the sprinkler and got them a little wet. But nevertheless, you put up with this stuff. We spent 21 years in the courts. Lord Hoy there knows about it. We've all had our time in jail, our time in courts, and you know, you think you've won a case, and the next time you get a different judge, or you get a different police officer, and they said we can't get within like 1,000 feet of the clinic, and they make up the laws as they go along. They don't know any law at all. The police don't make the law. They're supposed to enforce it. And they don't know what it is. So we have to tell them. And I usually, whenever a cop's talking to me, I call my lawyer. I just say, who do you call? And they say, hey, my lawyer. Then they get a little better. Because they know they're wrong. They know they're wrong. But we are going to suffer. We're going to carry wounds. We'll have wounds if we are in this battle seriously. And yet Christ was wounded. That's how he was recognized, by his wounds. When Thomas said, I don't believe it's him unless I can put my finger in the print of the nails and my hand in his side. And Jesus came back. And he said, here, come and do that. And be believing. Be believing. We have to know we're right. And we do know it. We know that we're right. And that's very important because the world doesn't know we're right. The world doesn't know anything. The people we go out to talk about are just living for the moment. They don't know anything about God or the future or heaven or hell, so many of them. It just doesn't enter their mind. But we know, and we have an obligation to take that truth out to our society. Jesus said so many times, go and teach. He wasn't just talking to those disciples and those apostles. He was talking to you and me. Time means nothing to him, this particular generation or that. He's speaking to us. We are called. We have a vocation to save these lives. We are doing God's work. You know, the whole universe. I was watching something last night. I couldn't leave it. I had to pretend I was sick because they were all swimming. And I had to stay and watch this. No, I was sick, Ann. I felt pretty bad. But I had to see this thing about the universe, about the enormous extension of space. I mean, it was mind-boggling. It would take so many billion light years to get across this galaxy, and that's just one of millions, maybe billions. There's no end to space. It just keeps going. Why not have something there? And you get into black light and so on, all kind of things, the black holes and the quasars and all this stuff that's going on. That God knew that a long time ago. In fact, I've been arguing with people that since God's creator, he created from the time he existed. That creation could be, there was never a beginning of creation. As long as God was the creator, there was always creation. And I had a lot of people argue with me, and then I was reading St. Thomas today and Aristotle, and they agree with me. So I feel pretty good. I'm probably wrong, but they were probably wrong, but nevertheless, because it says in the beginning. Well, what's the beginning? What's the beginning of God? And he's always been creator, so why don't he create? Anyway, we won't get into that. But it's just that we have this calling, and miracles are worked. If you want to see miracles, join the pro-life movement. I mean, everybody in this room could tell of something that couldn't happen. The chances are so minuscule that it could happen that you should try the lottery every weekend. You would win. Because you have had things happen, I have had things happen that couldn't happen. The chances are just almost unbelievably small. Remember, just to give an example, one time a guy came in and he said, I need somebody, there's a woman in our apartment building who is going to have an abortion. And what I got out from her was that she will not talk to anybody unless they speak Spanish, good Spanish, and unless they've had an abortion. Well, that was Lori Nelson. Lori Nelson had an abortion, some of you may know her, and she spoke perfect Spanish. She went to Cuernavaca in Mexico for the summer and came back speaking better Spanish than my sister-in-law, who's from Mexico City. And so it had to be Lori Nelson. Well, Chicago's a big town. It's bigger than Bloomington here, and bigger than, it's not as big as some said, about 8 million. 8 million people are running around Chicago on a workday. And we got to find Lori Nelson. We didn't know where she was. She was a Kelly girl. She could be anywhere. So I told the guy, well, look, I got a meeting. You can come with me, and we'll try to think of something. So we walked down Wabash Avenue. Now, Wabash is a bad street in Chicago because the L runs across there, and there's junk falling down all the time. People throw things out. We walked down Wabash instead of State Street, where I was supposed to be, past Marshall Field. The revolving door turns, and out walks Lori Nelson. Now, 1 second sooner we would have been past there. 1 second later we wouldn't have seen her. That's God's work. That's what he does. He does it all the time. Now, we're nobody. We are not the rich people. We're not the important people. Well, some of you might be, but most of all, I'm not. Most of all, we're just people. But we're the kind of people somehow that God wants to use. He took this little shriveled up nun, Mother Teresa. She's so small that if she was standing behind this podium, you wouldn't see her. You'd just see a little peak at the top of her habit. And one time I was in Washington, and Mother Teresa was giving a talk, and nobody could see her. And I had a box of books that didn't sell. It was called Closed, and nobody wanted it. So I just slipped the box of books over there, and I said, Sister, stand on this. And she stood up, and everybody cheered. They could see her face. And so I got a second-class relic now. A box of books. But he uses little people. We just recently had the patron saint of priests. Patron saint of priests all over the world. The Curé of Ars. Where the heck is Ars? In France. He dropped out of the seminary, or they tried to kick him out 2 or 3 times. He was so useless, they sent him out to this little town with a few Catholics. And yet he became the confessor, the preacher, the man who is now the patron saint of all of your diocesan priests. So God uses the little people. He uses those who are not great, not noble, not even well-spoken of. So it's us. He uses us to do great things, to save his children. And it's one of the most blessed things. So when Hamlet says, "Oh, cursed plight, that I was born to set it," I say, "Oh, blessed right." Blessings. There is nothing that I can think of that I would rather be doing now than saving these children. And I don't want to take too long because you got a really good talk coming up here that I was going to say ditto to, but now Father can say ditto to me. Anyway, that was Hamlet. Hamlet is by Shakespeare. And here's something that Hamlet wrote about Henry V. And it's from his play, Henry V. Now, Henry V was a real cad. But at least this talk he gave to his army the night before the Battle of Agincourt, I think is very significant for us. Whether you like Henry V or not, this is a good talk. Remember, Shakespeare wrote it. So, this story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by, from this day to the end of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today who sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. And be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition, and gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here. and hold their manhood cheap when any speaks who fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day. This is our St. Crispin's Day.